Let's bring you now Australian Israel Jewish Affairs Council Executive Director, Dr. Colin Rubenstein. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sherry.
How extreme is this resolution in your opinion?
It's about as extreme as you can get. It's ultra extreme. It's basically calling not only for the isolation of Israel, but the delegitimisation of Israel and ultimately its dismantling. So it's an omnibus resolution. It's got everything in it, all sorts of boycotts, economic boycotts, military boycotts, calling Israel apartheid, and basically calling for the unravelling of Israel and demanding the imposition, the coercion of Israel to accept the extreme Palestinian demand for a state. Not calling for negotiations. It upsets 30 years of Australian bipartisan support, by the way, which is for a negotiated resolution leading to a two-state outcome. None of that in this resolution should be very clear-cut for Australia simply to vote against it because it's so extreme. And it's totally counterproductive, actually, to moving forward, because it will only delay the possibility of genuine negotiations going forward, not expedite them.
Apart from the racism or anti-Semitism of, boycotts on Israeli companies and depriving Israel of weapons to defend itself and to fight terrorists, I think one of the most extreme parts of this is the demand for an unconditional withdrawal from Gaza. What country in the world would leave its own civilians, over 100 of them, just as hostages in the arms of terrorists? Who would ever support an unconditional withdrawal, leaving behind the hostages?
None, of course. It completely denies Israel's right to self-defence. There's no mention whatsoever of the atrocities of October 7. And, voting for this, or even abstaining in a way, would represent a reward for Hamas terrorism, for the genocidal, barbaric tactics and strategy of Hamas, and also the Palestinian Authority, which has its pay-for-slay policy, which also incites hatred towards Jews, which needs de-radicalising. And so it's just totally counterproductive in every possible respect. And a country like Australia shouldn't have to think twice about rejecting and opposing this resolution. And for the Americans to have to even pressure Australia to do this is not a good look for Australia in terms of our relationship with the United States, in terms of our standing as a democratic country, which should be supporting our friends and democratic allies in this situation.
Yeah, it shows the weakness of the current Albanese government. As you say, all Australian governments, it's been bipartisan policy for years to support Israel and its right to self-defence. The fact that the Biden administration has had to come to Australia and urge it to reject this motion, and I mean, it could very well be the position that Penny Wong ends up abstaining from it.
Well, it would be very disappointing if Australia can't simply reject this resolution. An abstention, unfortunately, would reflect the tilt against Israel that we've seen not only since October 7, but since this government took power. And it would be a very retrograde step, I think, for Australia's standing and our national interest and our national security.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about this story. This was originally front page of the Daily Telegraph last week. I covered it on my show. It's now in the Australian today. That the federal government, the Albanese government, has made available millions of dollars in funding to organisations. They have to apply for it for grants. One of those organisations is UMA, United Muslims Australia, which promotes on its website one of the hate preachers, Sheikh Dadoun, who said the day after October 7 attacks that he was elated. He was literally celebrating in the streets. What do you think about the Albanese government making available millions of dollars in funding to organisations that are promoting hate preachers?
Well, look, the program itself is good. It's to enhance security of faith organisations, Jewish, Muslim and so on. So the program is good. But actually giving grants to organisations who have within them speakers and individuals who actually promote hatred and violence is totally counterproductive to the whole purpose of the program. You don't give grants to those who are inciting hatred and violence. That simply undermines the whole purpose of the program, which is to enhance the security of communities and organisations. So it's a nonsense proposition. And of course, I think as the opposition spokesman correctly put it today, this sort of grant should not be given. It's really an abomination.
It really isn't. At the same time, failing to crack down on hate speech. It's been nearly a year. We know the laws need to be improved and nothing's been done.
There's certain slackness in granting public money all around, from the Australian Research Council to a variety of other programs designed to enhance social cohesion. You do not give it to individuals who enhance racial hatred and racism and even, incite violence. Yeah. So we have to have a good look at the way in which the taxpayers' money is spent, I think, in all of these cases.
What gets me is that front page of the Daily Telegraph in the Australian, covering it here on the show, and the government just shrugs its shoulders, doesn't care, moves on. The rest of the media let them get away with it. I don't
think the Australian public will let them get away with it at the end of the day. I think we still live in a democracy and you can't fool all the people all the time. I really feel the Australian public is waking up to the problems being inflicted on us. We want to see cohesion. We don't want to see programs and policies going to those individuals and organisations who are undermining the very fabric of our, so far, cohesive multicultural society. You don't give money or support to those who are undermining our commitment to the core values of democracy and the security and viability and liberty of our society.
Absolutely agree. Like I say often, we can all have our own opinions, as we do. It's a democracy on what's happening in the Middle East, but the most important thing for all of us is not to have racism, not to have violence on our streets, for our children to grow up in peace. That those conflicts shouldn't be playing out here. We shouldn't be worried for everyone's physical safety. Colin Rubenstein, really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much.